You are listening to the Maple Footy Podcast. This is the unofficial football podcast of the North. I'm your host, Sam Little. Find me at official Sam Little on Instagram. There's nothing left to say except for sit back, enjoy, and welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Maple Footy Podcast, and I really hope you're not getting sick of hearing my voice. 2 episodes earlier this week, this one, and then there will be 2 more extremely soon as the next round of the CPL Playoffs will be kicking off, as well as, of course, the traditional Premier League, English Premier League recap will also be going up within the next week as well. So a lot of Maple Footy, but that's okay. I hope you don't mind. And like I said, I hope you're not just sick of my voice just yet. But yes, of course, we're talking about the CPL and the CPL playoffs. The first game took place last night as of recording, and it was between York and Pacific. And York were the hosts. Never have they ever won a playoff game. That, of course, has now changed. Big win for them. But first, before we get into the CPL, let's talk about the MLS just real quick. Not going to devote a whole ton of time to this because I'm going to be honest, I didn't watch the game. I fell asleep. I was a sleepy guy. But the Vancouver Whitecaps, yes, the Canadian side, which is, of course, why we're covering it, beat Portland Timbers, who obviously have Max Crepeau and Kamal Miller, 2 Canadian internationals, and it wasn't a close game. 5-0 to the Whitecaps, a hat trick from Gauld, a goal from Brian Wright, and I don't know who else scored the other goal, if I'm being honest. I could look. Let me check. But yeah, it was a statement win in the playoffs for Vancouver, and it's an embarrassing way for Portland to kind of end the season. And sorry, the other goal was Stuart Armstrong. Kind of an embarrassing way for Portland to end the season. It was a very up and down season for them. I think we can all agree on that. And it ends on a massive down. Of course, the Whitecaps, it goes up from here. They will play LAFC in the next round of the competition. So big good luck to the Whitecaps. That won't be easy. LAFC is they're a pretty decent team. They're a good team. So it'll be tough for the Whitecaps. But, you never know. Playoff football, anything can happen. And in our other Canadian representative in the competition, Montreal sadly did get ousted in the first round as they were down 2-0 in all fairness and then brought it back to 2-2, only to then lose on penalties. There is no overtime in these rounds of the MLS playoffs. I don't know off the top of my head when the extra time kicks in for the MLS playoffs. I would assume the final for sure, and everything after that I really don't know. So they kind of bring it back from 2-0 down to bring it 2-2. Maybe if there was overtime, extra time, it would have been different, maybe, because they did have a lot of the momentum swing in their way. But then penalties, you flip a coin and that's what happens, right? But enough of the MLS playoffs. This is not the MLS playoff coverage. This is the CPL coverage. Imagine I was doing both simultaneously. I'd be doing MLS, CPL, and then on top of that, like the Premier League. Oh my gosh. Imagine that. That'd be crazy. But anyways, so one team through, another one is done. We're down to the final 4 in the CPL playoffs. And I'll start out kind of talking about Pacific just a little bit. The only ever team not named Forge to win the North Star. At the time they won it was the Shield. Now it's the North Star Cup. The only team that's ever done it that's not named Forge, and they did it in Forge's backyard, something that I think they wish they could have done last night, doing it in their opposition's backyard, but wasn't meant to be. And I kind of can't help but feel for Pacific just because they've had so many injuries this year. They've been pretty injury riddled, and to kind of make the playoffs, in my opinion, is a bit of an accomplishment in that sense. once you're kind of in the playoffs, I think that kind of all goes out the window, because once you're in the playoffs, I think your only expectation should be to win it, not just to be there. And I'm not saying they were just happy to be there. No, you could tell the players were very disappointed at the end of the game. And their captain, Josh Hurd, who got subbed on in the 63rd, he had this to say, and I quote, "It's quite fresh right now. We came up short. It wasn't enough. There will be time for reflection, but for right now, it's bitter, bitter disappointment." And that's the end of the quote. I think that just kind of goes to show that I think this loss is kind of going to stick with them a little bit, especially when you kind of look at the first half when, in all fairness, I'll kind of get more into the play, especially the first half a little bit. I don't think it was a great first half. I don't really think either team looked on it, per se. But in the first half, they had probably their best opportunity of the game. And it was when it was 0-0, and you might go back and think, if Dyer scores, is it a different game? Now, it's not me pinning the entire loss on Dyer, but it's one of those things where you look and you go, it was 0-0, your striker, he doesn't convert. It's those little moments, I think, that separates you, especially in knockout football. It kind of separates you from being the winners and being the losers, obviously. And another player quote that I kind of thought was a little bit interesting, that kind of just speaks to how disappointed these players are, is from Dada Luke, who also, by the way, I thought was probably Pacific's man of the match. I thought he just never stopped. He looked really eager, and I just thought it was a very good performance. I'm always impressed by him when I do get to watch him. I've seen him a couple times in person, actually, and of course, a few times like actually watching him on TV. But this is what he had to say, and I quote, "To the best fans in the CPL, Lakeside Boyos, Calamari Collective, and the locals who always come to support, thank you for remaining loyal and cheering us on through the ups and downs this season. You deserve better, and this club does also. Unfortunately, we did not reach our goal in bringing another championship back to the island. The team will take this time to reflect and improve and come back stronger than ever for next season. Thank you once again for all the support, PFC fans. Your endless support does not go unnoticed." End quote. So I think that just kind of goes to show that I think the Pacific players are kind of feeling it. I think one of the commentators that said last night might have been Jimmy Brennan. If it's not him, then it might have been his commentating partner. And if not him, then shit, I must have dreamed it. But one of them had said that they do think that for certain players, it could feel like a very long off season, given some chances not converted. And when you kind of look at it, was a close game. I know it was 2-0, but it was a pretty close game. And you kind of look at that and you're like, yeah, I think it could be a very long off season. You have nothing to do except for train and just sit and reflect. And so I just hope that the players do kind of get the break that they do deserve. It is a long season, a lot of travel. I think we don't talk about the travel in the CPL, but that travel is insane. But of course, there is always a winner and a loser. But I just thought those two quotes are interesting because I think it does show how much these guys care and how much they did want to run back was it 2021 that they won it. So I think they kind of wanted to run back that 2021 magic, but it wasn't to be, obviously. But anyways, let's kind of talk a little bit more about the game. And we'll kind of stick with Pacific, as I kind of did mention. I don't think either team, especially in the first half, I don't think either team was great. I thought it was, there's usually, I find, two sides of knockout football. Either it is just balls to the wall, crazy, like back and forth, like great action, or it's kind of a cagey, feeling you out kind of way of playing. And it was very much the latter instead of the former for this match. It was very much neither team wanted to make a mistake given obviously everything that's on the line. They didn't want to make their mistake. No one really wanted to take it to the other team, and that goes for both teams. But obviously, as I've kind of mentioned, that dire chance, it was like the 20 to 25 minute range, I believe. He breaks through, and it's a great ball to him. I can't remember who set him through, but it was great. And those are the kinds of things that you're going to be thinking about in the offseason, I think. But he should finish. He doesn't. It's at 0-0. That could change the entire course of the game. But Pacific then kind of go back to being in their shell a little bit, not really super engaged. Like I said earlier, I thought Dadaluke was very good. Like I said, anything that like they kind of did attacking, Dadaluke was the guy kind of leading the charge. He was a burst of energy, always eager to get the ball, run up the wing, test out what the York defenders midfield were all about. Sometimes he just kind of didn't either get the help or, one man can only do so much. I do also think Stefan Yates, I thought he had a quietly good game. I thought he was breaking up play well. I thought he made it very difficult for York, especially in that first half. I think he made it very difficult for them to kind of mount anything at all. And I also thought Reed had a very good game. He kind of got pulled off in the 63rd. He's one of the guys that struggled with injury this year. So you kind of look and you go, man, maybe if you had a healthy Reed, like a fully 100% fit, maybe it's a different game, But I thought he had a very good game. I thought you could tell when he came off, he looked exhausted. And I mean, hey, when you run that much in the 63 minutes that you're on the pitch, yeah, I don't blame you. I hope he had a very good sleep that night. But yeah, no, he had a very good game. I don't think there was like a disaster class either. Like there was no player where I went, oh my gosh. Like I know I've kind of harped on that dire missed chance, but I still don't think he had a bad game. That was really his one true chance of the game. So it's kind of hard to, as a striker, kind of hard to get in the game, get in the groove when you're really only getting like a couple touches here and there and then no service. And like I said, then your one chance, you don't score, and then that's what's kind of sticking with you all game. And I'm sure that mentally that's kind of a bit of a barrier, But I also thought that their keeper, Melvin, made a couple of nice saves, especially when the game was still at 1-0. So when Pacific is still very much in the game, he kind of kept that hope alive, I found. He made some very, very nice stops. But once again, obviously just isn't meant to be. I do think where Pacific was kind of let down was in the wide attacking areas. I thought Moore and Zanetta, they weren't as productive and proactive as their opposite numbers for York, who we'll kind of talk about a little bit very soon. But yeah, I think when the few times Zanetta did get to attack and challenge the York defense, he was causing problems. So I don't know if it was a tactical thing. I don't know if it was a coaching thing or what. Or maybe he was just marked out of the game. I have no idea. But regardless, I don't know why they didn't keep going back to that well, because he was causing problems the few times he got the ball in a meaningful area. So it's one of those things where it's like, get him the ball. But I don't know, maybe it was a tactical choice to just kind of stay in the cagey kind of not really pushing kind of way. But, those are the things that, like I said, they come back to haunt you, and it kind of does here. But moving on from Pacific, as I think I've kind of said my piece on them, I do think still a relatively successful season, given the fact that they had to battle a good few injuries throughout to some big players, as I kind of mentioned, Reed for sure. But, it is tough when you are one of two teams to ever win this competition, and to go out in the first game against a team that's never won a knockout, a playoff game, period. I think it's tough. It's going to be a tough pill to swallow, but, as Data Luke and I'm sure many other players have echoed, they do have a very good fan base, a very loyal fan base, so I'm sure the fans will hopefully help lift them up heading into the next season. It's a big off season. You never know what's going to happen, especially with some CPL teams. You just don't know who's going to go, who's going to stay, and the transfers within the league as well. So it'll be interesting to kind of keep up with Pacific throughout the off season, but let's talk about the boys that bounced them out of the competition with their first ever playoff win. York United take a bow. 6 seasons in the making, and they finally have done it. They've got their first playoff win, and oh my, does it set up for a very tasty fixture against Atletico Ottawa. Yes, if you weren't aware, there is some beef between the two managers of the respective clubs. It kind of all started when Carlos Gonzalez of Atletico Ottawa, their head coach, had said that York United was the worst team in the playoffs, and he kind of said more, but that's kind of the gist of it. And then, of course, York United's head coach, not to be outdone, his name, Benjamin Mora, says, who? When he's asked about it in a press conference. So I think that tells you all you need to know. I know that York has actually a very good record against Atletico Ottawa this year. I believe they're 7 or 8-2 on aggregate over them this season. So I would say they might be going in as the favorites. Of course, they've never made it to this round of the playoffs, so they might not be. But I do think that it just adds that little bit of drama and tension that you kind of live for in the game. You love when the managers kind of get going after each other, and it's a lot of fun. But enough about Atletico Ottawa. We're not talking about them just yet. We're still talking about York United. And yeah, I thought in the first half, they definitely very much, I don't want to say struggled, but they definitely weren't playing the nicest brand of football. They weren't, kind of much like Pacific. They looked like they didn't want to make a mistake, and they looked like they didn't want to, be the guy that kind of cost your team in the playoffs, But kind of come the second half, I think it very much helped that they scored extremely early on. It was not even, I'm not even sure if it was 2 minutes into the second half when they do score. And on York's part, it's a very nice goal, a great ball by Cordova to Leon, and it is a very great goal on their part. I do think that that's one of the things that Pacific will kind of be thinking about a little bit, the fact that they just couldn't clear that ball for the life of them. No one just puts their laces through it, puts their header through it, nothing. Just one of those ones where I think as a defender, you're going to be kicking yourself. But Cordova, by the way, had a great game. Another one that I've kind of had the pleasure of seeing in person a good few times, as well as obviously watching him on the TV. Great game. He's kind of, as commentary alluded, he's kind of been their utility player throughout this season. He's kind of fit everywhere that York has needed. I mean, Buddy probably put on some gloves if they needed it. But yeah, very, very, very good game from him. Unlucky to not leave with a goal as well. He, at some point in the second half, he takes the ball down beautifully in the box, takes around one of the players, and then hits the post. It's a very nice shot. I think he has the keeper beat, in all fairness. And it just hits the post, one of those ones. But he looked extremely lively. Kind of like what I said about Data Luke. Anything that Data Luke was doing, anything that Pacific was doing went through Data Luke. Anything that York was kind of doing on the attack went through Cordova. He had a very, very good game, I thought. And obviously, Canada Soccer did as well, as he got the Gatorade performance of the game. So definitely a very good game from him. And I think it was honestly, especially in the second half, I think it was a pretty solid shift from all of their players. Like the goalkeeper, in all fairness, Vincenzini, didn't have a whole ton to do. I'm kind of trying to think of any notable saves he had to make, and I really can't tell you many. I actually thought it was a pretty quiet afternoon for their defense as a whole. Like Leon, I thought did well to score, but didn't have much to do defensively. Higgins and Stirring didn't have a whole ton to do either. Stirring, I thought, did link up well with Cardova, and Leon, of course, was there when they needed him for the goal. But then moving kind of into that midfield, Cardova, obviously, as we talked about, I thought was probably the man of the match. And then you kind of move into the center of the park with Elijah Adekubi. Once again, a very well-rounded performance, and I don't think you'd expect anything less from Elijah Adekubi, kind of a veteran of the league at this point. He's been around. He knows how to get it done, and I mean, he did great here. I thought he was vital to the win. He, once again, just kind of broke up play really well, and I think, especially in that second half, really helped control the tempo for York United. I thought he kind of eased the pressure, kind of just that assuring performance from your number 8 that you would want. His partner, Baldasimo, once again, kind of much like Adekubi, just kind of a nice calming presence in that midfield. And this also notably against his former club here. I'm not sure if things ended well between the two, like if it was just a normal transfer or if there was like some behind the scenes drama. But so I'm not sure if that's like one of the ones where he's like, yeah, that feels good, because beating your former club and whatnot. But yeah, once again, just a solid performance from number 33. And kind of on the left there as well, Orlando Botello, sorry. Once again, I thought he was very, very class. He had a little bit less productive of an evening than Cordova, but I thought he was very much taking it to that Pacific back line and to the midfield. He was very much, I would say he was up and back, but he didn't really have to go back a whole ton. When he did have to go back, he was very up and back, but very much an attacking presence, definitely, and just very much a danger. I thought he'd be one that I would kind of keep an eye on if I was Atletico Ottawa, kind of a bit of a, I don't want to say a sleeper, but kind of one of those ones where he could cause you problems, and he was causing problems when he got on the ball. Some big chances created, I thought, that maybe could have led to something more, and just very much in the thick of it, I found, which is what you kind of want from one of your, I guess, wingback in this game. Get what you kind of want from them. Looking at the front three, a very obviously pretty well experienced front three, I would say. Kibeto, Selenovic, and obviously Mobobuli. I don't think it was obviously like it wasn't like a masterclass performance from the front three, but I thought they did enough to kind of get York over the hump. What they kind of lacked, I would say, in end product, they kind of made up for with their work rate. I thought they worked very hard off the ball, all three of them, kind of really making it so Pacific was kind of uncomfortable throughout the 90. And I think that was kind of reflected in Pacific's performance, as they never really got out of their own half at times, you know what I mean? So it kind of started from the top, that pressing, and obviously, you want your forwards to score your goals, but sometimes it's the other guys on the pitch that are getting them. I do know Mobobuli did score, and I will talk about that in just a second. But, you kind of want your forwards to score, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. So at least if they are working hard off the ball, I think that's very important, and that's kind of what happened here. And then obviously Mobobuli kind of gets a second goal in the 93rd, I believe it was. It was well into stoppage time, and it was the icing on the cake of a massive York win. And I think it's symbolic that it's the captain, obviously former Forge player, so he knows how to do it in the playoffs. I mean, you're not a former Forge player, you don't know how to do it, but he knows how to do it in the playoffs, and I think that's kind of, that goal obviously solidifies the night for them and gets them that first ever win. It's a very well taken goal. I think, Pacific, that's when they were really pushing. That last kind of 10-15 minutes was really the most you saw of the Pacific attack. And of course, when you do that, you leave yourself open and susceptible to a counterattack, which is what happened. Mobobuli takes the ball, finishes pretty calmly, which you would expect from the veteran. of the game at this point. And yeah, I mean, it's what you want from your captain, from your veteran, from a winner, and that's what winners do. They clinch it for you and leave no question marks whatsoever in that remaining 2-3 minutes. You know you're going through now. And it was a very nice take and goal. And I do think, despite it being a pretty close game at times, I do think the second half did separate the two. And it is York's night, and I think that's what matters most. Those fans, I think, definitely have yearned for that in these seasons, as well as the players. That means a lot to those players to get that monkey off your back, to get out of the first round of the playoffs. I think it's that monkey off your back. It shows that you can do it, and now they're going to be going to Ottawa full of confidence and full of a point to prove, because do you know how great it would be if you are the ones that knock out the guy that said, you guys ain't that good. So I think it would be extremely interesting, and I think it's definitely a must-watch Canadian game. I think, it's one of those ones I think you're going to want to watch. I think it's going to be pretty fiery. It's going to have that edge to it. And I think it'll be that one where every player is going in for a 50-50 and like a little bit hard, if you know what I mean. So it'll be an interesting game that is taking place in Ottawa on the 27th. There will be two Canadian Premier League playoff games that day, and it'll hopefully be two very good games. Speaking of those two games, let's give it just a little bit of a preview. We'll start with Atletico York, because I think for both games there's a lot to kind of say and talk about. So obviously, as we kind of did discuss, York and Ottawa have now that newly born rivalry. I don't think anybody would have predicted less than a month ago. So I think that'll be very interesting. And of course, York will be hot off of that first ever win. And it's not like, in some playoffs where you have to wait that week or so. It's only a few days, so it's not like they've come down off the high just yet. I think they're still going to be riding that wave and riding that momentum. The question just is, do they kind of have enough, especially with such a passionate fan base like Atletico Ottawa, who I expect them to be in full voice and letting York kind of know where they are. And it'll be a very interesting game to watch unfold. For me, I think the players to watch are, of course, Cordova, who, put on a very, very good show against Pacific, as we kind of did discuss. Looking at Atletico Ottawa, I believe you could probably argue a good few. I would say that Ollie Bassett is the player to watch, kind of their Kyle Becker, for Forge fans. Kind of their Kyle Becker. He's just a midfield general, has the goals, has the assists in the locker, just 26 years old, entering his prime. I think he's going to be hungry for this. Not to say that the other Ottawa players won't be. But yeah, tune into that game for sure. I don't think you're going to want to miss it. But kind of now switching focus to the final of last year. Of course, it's a rematch of the final of last year. A lot of history between these two teams, Cavalry and Forge. And of course, they are the two teams that played off in the first ever CPL final, where Forge, of course, became forever first. So I think Cavalry is hungry and desperate for a win against Forge. Of course, just because they do beat Forge, it doesn't mean that they won't meet in the final. But this would mean that Cavalry, if they were to win, would host the final. And of course, same goes for Forge. If they win, they host the final. But for me, player to watch is Dan Klump. I thought, he's in a lot of people's team of the seasons for the CPL, and he is a very solid center back. I've seen him, once again, like many of these players, I've seen him play a good few times in person and, of course, on television. I think he is just, he's a solid center back, the number 4. He's calm and assured on the ball. He's very much just that type of center back. You know what I mean? He's solid. He's stable at the back. He's composed. And it's just what you want. I know, you don't usually think of like a player to watch, and you go, yeah, the defender. But he just is that good. He's one of course, if we don't count some of Forge's center backs, he's probably the best center back in the league outside of like Janssen. I can't go against my Forge boys. But yeah, he's a good center back and definitely one to keep your eye on. And of course, for Forge, the player to watch is always Tristan Borges. He's, in my opinion, this is probably the best Tristan Borges we've seen in the CPL. I know, what do you mean? He won the MVP back in 2019. And yeah, guess what? I give him the MVP this year too, because he has been that good. He's just operating on a level at the moment that kind of makes it hard for you to think that he won't have an impact on the game, because the goals are there. The assists are there. They back me up on this one, baby. But away from that, I just think his overall play, the way he can control a game and kind of be that maestro that you want from your number 10. I know he kind of plays out wide centrally as well, but kind of what you want from a player like Tristan Borges. And, I keep on saying this. I'm very happy he's a Hamilton player, of course, but if I'm like an MLS club or something, I can't believe they're not taking a punt on him. He is, I think, that good. To me, he's probably the best player in the league this year, and he is my player to watch for Forge. I do think it'll be a very interesting game, and I can't wait to watch these two games on Sunday. I think it'll be a very good day for Canadian football, and I think that hopefully they both have the makings to be very good games, so hopefully they both are very good games. But of course, that kind of brings us to the end of this Maple Footy podcast. It was something different. It was a little bit more off the cuff. I kind of just watched the game. I didn't really make many notes. I usually make notes when I'm watching the games when I want to talk about them. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to watch this and just be a fan of Canadian football first, and Maple Footy podcast host second. But I don't regret it. It was a lot of fun. I do hope that it was still a good episode for you, because if it wasn't, then I do apologize for that. But no, it was very good. I'm very happy that Canadian football is at a point now where we're kind of getting these big game feels. Like York Ottawa feels like a big game. Cavalry Forge feels like a big game. Just 10 years ago, outside of the MLS, when it was Montreal against TFC or TFC against the Whitecaps or any iteration of those games, that's about it. We didn't really have that. Now it feels like we got that. And I just hope that this league continues to grow and prosper. And I will say it every time I talk about the CPL, expand. I think it needs to expand. Obviously, not all at once, but I think they do have to start expanding. I think it's only good for the league if they do. But that's just my take. And, that and $1.50 gets you Tim Hortons coffee. But with all this being said, I do hope you have enjoyed. I will, of course, be covering Cavalry and Forge and Atletico Ottawa and York United. It'll be a great Sunday filled with some great football. I can't wait. I do hope that you watch those games, and I of course hope that you enjoyed this and will listen when I do inevitably cover both of those games. It'll be a very good time. I can't wait. Follow along here or any of my socials, or all of the above, follow here and the socials, whatever works for you. But yeah, no, just follow along, and until next time, cheers, everyone.
And that was your Maple Footy podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Check my socials for any and all future updates at Official Sam Little on Instagram, where I am most active. And until next time, live, laugh, little.